2024. I am calling this meeting of the Boiler Board Rules to order. I would like to ask everybody to mute their microphones and only turn them on when they are asked to speak. I would also like to remind them remind everybody when you do speak, please start with your name so that we know who is speaking, and also be advised this is being recorded. At this time, Alex, I will ask you to do the roll call, sir, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, we'll start with Palmer Dent, George Crawford, Alan Kripe.
You said it right. I'm here.
Thank you. Kyle Stell,
Present.
Bill Quisenberry,
Present.
Brian Mullen, Timothy McNulty,
I'm here.
Stuart Shannon Nestor,
Present.
Mark Thompson,
Present.
and Richard West. Okay, and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go, since we have a quorum, we can continue. We'll move forward with approval of the minutes. Everybody on the board should have received the minutes as of April 10th, 2024 in the meeting materials. I would ask if there's any comments on the minutes as presented. Sounding like there's not. If there are no comments, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented.
Mr.
Rob
Chairman,
Shannon Nestor. Okay, go ahead. Al, go ahead.
I'll yield to Mr. Nestor and follow with a second.
Mr. Chairman, Stuart Nestor, I move to approve the former minutes of our last meeting.
Thank you. And
I'll
Mr.
second.
Quisenberry, thank
I'll
you.
second it. Thank you.
Okay. Since there was no comments, I am going to ask Alex to go ahead and call for a roll call vote. So it'll be a vote when he calls your name.
Okay, thank you, sir. George Crawford, Alan Kripe,
Aye.
Kyle Stell,
Aye.
Bill Quisenberry,
Aye.
Timothy McNulty,
Aye.
Stuart Shannon Nestor,
Aye.
and Mark Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Ortiz, I was just notified that Mr. Mullen just logged on.
Oh.
If you could please update the record for that.
Yes, sir. Okay, Mr. Mullen, can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir? Mr. Mullen? You're muted if you're responding. Okay. Staff will work with him and try to get him set up.
Thank you. So, Alex, did our vote for approval of the minutes approve?
Yes, sir. The motion has passed.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so this is going to bring us to the public comment section. we've received 5 requests to speak during today's meetings. Each one will have 3 days, and I will give them instructions when they come in. I would like to let the board members know, the board will not be allowed to ask questions or discuss anything said during their comments. This is just the time for them to be able to give us comments on what they want to talk about to the board. So, Alex, can we bring in Mr. Logan Harrell? Mr. Harrell, are you in here?
Mr. Harrell is here.
Okay. Mr. Harrell, I have some, I'm sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Can you hear me, Mr. Harrell?
I can hear you, Alex.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Harrell, thank you for being here. When you begin speaking, please state your name and who you represent. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please understand that the board members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in a discussion with you about anything that is not specific on the agenda. Do you understand these instructions?
Yes, sir.
You have 3 minutes. Please start when you're ready.
Good morning, Chief Inspector, members of the board. My name is Logan Harrell. I'm General Counsel and Director of Regulatory Affairs with the Texas Chemistry Council. TCC represents 67 member companies who own and operate 200 chemical manufacturing and research facilities across the state. Our industry is responsible for nearly 500,000 Texas jobs and the state's largest non-energy export, with over 50 billion in products exported to customers around the world. Our industry uses boilers to provide necessary steam and energy for the manufacturing processes at our facilities. Several of our members also have generation facilities that supply the Texas grid with electricity during certain times. That's why it's important to TCC that the proposed boiler rules remain clear and provide certainty. I'd like to thank the TDLR staff for their work on the proposed rule package. I understand the goal of these proposed rules is to improve and clean up the rules in certain areas, and TCC shares that sentiment because having certainty in the regulations ensures our members understand the expectations and can plan accordingly. I'm providing public comment today on a very narrow aspect of the proposed rules, specifically the proposed rule language in 16 Texas Administrative Code, Section 65.13. TCC supports the public comments submitted by Luminant during the proposed comment rule period that raises concerns about some of the ambiguous terms used in Section 65.13A2 for boiler reinstallation. The terms disconnection and reconnection, or disassembly and reassembly, are the terms at issue. After speaking with TDLR staff, it appears the intent of these terms is not necessarily meant to broaden the scope of when the installation report is required for reinstallation based on the current rules. However, TCC is concerned that these terms could be interpreted to include additional activities like certain maintenance actions that would not currently trigger the need for an installation report, but could be characterized as maybe disassembly or reassembly. Therefore, TCC requests this board not recommend the proposed changes in that specific section, 65.13, and either consider the proposed language provided in Luminant's public comment, or have the TDLR staff reconsider the proposed language to ensure this section of the rule has more clarity. I believe this might require reevaluation and changes to Section 65.87 as well. I know TCC has worked with TDLR in the past during proposed boiler rulemakings and appreciates this board's consideration of our comments today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. So, Alex, can you bring in Mr. Harden now, please? And
Yes.
also let me know when he's in.
Hey, Mr. Harden is here.
Okay,
Mr. Harden, can
thank
you
you.
hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
We can hear you, Tony.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Harden, for being here. When you begin to speak, please state your name and who you represent. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please understand that the board members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in a discussion with you about anything that is not specific to the agenda. Do you understand these instructions?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes, sir. Please start when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, board members, Boiler board members, and staff. I'm Tony Harden, Boiler SME for the Vistra Luminant Generating Company, the largest power generator and operator of thermal generation in Texas, with 40 boilers and heat recovery steam generators that are licensed and regulated by TDLR. We are concerned for the proposed additions to Rule 65.13 that will create massive uncertainty and potentially impair electric reliability by delaying return to service following planned outage maintenance. We ask that you either reject these changes outright or refer the proposed changes to a subcommittee of owner-operators and insurance representatives for further discussion of need, purpose, intent, and detailed definition. In either scenario, proposed changes to 65.87 would also need to be harmonized, though 65.13 is the primary concern. 65.13-A-2 is a specific concern. Summarized, 65.13-A states the owner-operator must submit a boiler installation report for 1, a boiler installation, or 2, a boiler reinstallation following relocation, disconnection and reconnection, or disassembly and reassembly. This is a significant departure from the existing rule without stated purpose or intent and introduces new terms with no definition or explanation. We understand from talking with the boiler staff that there is no intent to change the process or requirements for boiler inspections. In that case, why would TDLR add new undefined terms like reconnection, disassembly, and reassembly? Under the statute, the inspection is required for new boilers, boilers being relocated, and boilers retired in place or in long-term layup that are being brought back into service. A rule stating reinstallation following disconnection and reconnection or disassembly and reassembly infers owner-operators may be required to submit an installation report, perform a first inspection, and possibly be required to apply for temporary operating permits for boilers that are still in service, have not been moved, have maintained their current operating inspections and certificates, and have undergone maintenance repairs or well repairs. A big change and not supported by the statute. This rule adds risks and unknown to outage planning and execution and potential outage extensions for proposed rules with no stated need, purpose, or intent. We ask that you please either reject these changes outright to 6513, which is our preference, along with any associated changes to other sections, or put them to a subcommittee of knowledgeable boiler owner-operators and insurance representatives for further discussion of need, intent, purpose, and detailed definition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harden. So I believe Robert Bissonnette, are you in here?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good morning.
Mr. Burnett, hold on, sir. I have instructions for you first.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Burnett, thank you for being here. When you begin speaking, please state your name and who you represent. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please understand that the board members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in any discussion with you about anything that is not specific on the agenda. Do you understand these instructions?
Yes, I do.
You have 3 minutes, sir. Please start when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Robert Bissonnette. I work for Entergy Services Incorporated, based out of the Woodlands. Entergy has operating utility power units and boilers in 3 states, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Texas is the focus of this. So with regard to Title 16, paragraph 65.13, Article A, Subarticle 2, the terms disassembly and reassembly in the as proposed language introduce confusion and ambiguity that could be interpreted to include boiler-related components or equipment, repairs and or replacements that frequently occur during normal maintenance and repair cycles. We propose additional clarification, or if applicable, remove this requirement for maintenance to existing boilers having valid operating licenses in the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Bisnet. That brings us to Mr. Brian Sams. Are you in here, sir?
Yes, sir, and I'm ready for your instructions.
Okay. Mr. Sams, thank you for being here. When you begin speaking, please state your name and who you represent. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please understand that the board members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in a discussion with you about anything that is not specific on the agenda. Do you understand these instructions?
Yes, sir.
You have 3 minutes, sir. Please start when you're ready.
Good morning. I'm Brian Sams, Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Calpine Corporation. Just quickly about Calpine, we're headquartered in Houston, and we own and operate about 9,000 megawatts of combined cycle generation in Texas, specifically in ERCOT. And to just put that in context, that's enough power supply to power more than 2 million homes and businesses across the state. We support the Luminant comments and appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment this morning. Generators like Calpine are constantly taking facilities in and out of service for routine maintenance. Like commentary from others, our primary concern is Section 6513, which lacks clarity as it applies to maintenance and return to service activity. Our request is simple. It's to allow an opportunity for additional input on this section to clarify the intent as it applies to electric generators. And we are happy to participate in any subsequent discussion and appreciate your consideration of our request this morning. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sams. Mr. Christopher Smith, are you in here, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Smith, thank you for being here. When you begin speaking, please state your name and who you represent. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please understand that the board members are not allowed to discuss or ask any questions or engage in a discussion with you about anything that is not specific on the agenda. Do you understand these instructions?
Yes, sir.
You have 3 minutes. Please start when you're ready, sir.
Good morning, board. My name is Chris Smith with Constellation, and I'll be speaking on agenda item F, specifically the rule change proposed for 16 TAC 65.13. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Within our generation fleet are plants located in Granbury, Wharton, and Fort Worth, all of which would be impacted by the proposed changes before you. Constellation appreciates the board's continued efforts to ensure safe operations of boilers across the state of Texas. However, we believe additional clarity is needed regarding the proposed amendments to 16 TAC 65.13 of the inclusion of the undefined terms disassembly and reassembly for the purposes of determining when a boiler installation report must be submitted, and the possible request for a temporary boiler operating permit inserts a level of uncertainty and risk currently unaccounted for by boiler owner-operators. Due to the proposed changes, some level of power generation may be unavailable to the grid during a time of need, while our operators attempt to determine if the authorized inspector may consider the maintenance performed to rise to the level of an additional inspection, which had not been required prior to the rule change. We are asking for the board to reconsider the proposed changes to 16 TAC 65.13 and to allow for further discussions to accomplish the intent of the board while providing the clarity sought by industry participants. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. All right, Alex, please let me know when you're ready to move forward with staff reports.
Okay, we are ready, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we're moving into the staff reports from on the agenda. So first we have the licensing division report. So I would ask for Ms. Tiffany Red to present that.
Good morning. I'm Tiffany Ritt, team lead for the licensing division. The licensing statistics were provided to you showing the number of new and renewed licenses for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 through June. As of June 30th, the authorized inspection agency population is 19 and the inspector population is 234. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Tiffany, board members? Seeing no hands raised. So I'm going to ask board members to raise their hand if they have a question about any of the statistics or the briefings from staff. So thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate it. We will now move to Education and Exam Division. And I would like to call on John Schildwasser. Did I pronounce that right, John?
Good morning. Yes, sir. My name is John Schildwasser, and good morning, presiding officer, and of course, board members and TDLR staff. My name, like I said, is John Schildwasser, and I represent the Education Examination Division. And today I will be sharing our statistics for the last 2 fiscal years, current 2024 and last 2023. As you can see there in front of you, the pass rates stay fairly consistent, although the numbers are quite low for the last 2 years. I'll be here to answer any questions you may have, and I thank you for your time.
So, members, I just realized that we can't see you raise your hand because we're sharing our screens. So if you do have a comment, please just unmute your mic and state your name, and then you can make your comment. Is there anyone having any questions for Mr. Schildwasser? Hearing none, we'll move forward with the Customer Service Division. I would like to call on Patricia Martinez-Caslin.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, advisory board members. I'm Patricia Martinez-Castellan, manager in customer service. I'll be sharing our statistics today. Our program shows the number of phone calls and emails received for the boiler program during fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Please let me know if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Patricia. So we will move forward with the Enforcement Division, and I would like to call on Rebecca Burkhalter.
Good morning, board members. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Just making sure. I've been having some technical difficulties this morning. My name is Rebecca Burkhalter. I'm a senior prosecutor for the Enforcement Division. I believe these presentations are usually conducted by Cynthia Marple, but she has a conflict with the SOA hearing today, so I'll be presenting the report for you. At the top, you'll see the division's performance measures, which are reported to the legislature. These statistics are for September 1st through the month of June for each fiscal year. You may notice we closed complaints more quickly in fiscal year 2024 than we did in fiscal year 2023. That may reflect some staff turnover that we've had, specifically in prosecutors who were working the program in the past couple of years. The next section is the criminal history review for applicants who may have disqualifying criminal history. These cases are handled by our criminal history prosecutors, but there were none of these cases in either fiscal year. The next section details where the Enforcement Division's complaints come from, whether they are from consumers or from within the agency. The top of the next page puts that in a pie chart for you. You may notice the pie graph only shows 2 consumer cases opened in fiscal year 2024 versus the preceding chart saying there were 9. That's because there's a difference between complaints received and whether those complaints actually got opened as an enforcement case because they met minimum jurisdictional requirements. So the pie chart matches better with the statistics right beneath it that say caseloads in enforcement, where it shows we opened 11 cases in fiscal year 2024. Like I said, we managed to close more cases than we opened this year. The orders issued are the end of the road for the disciplinary action. You can see in fiscal year 2024, we had 4 agreed orders where the person or company admits they made a mistake, paid an applicable fine. The penalties and consumer remedies section details how many fines were assessed versus actually collected. It is unusual to collect all of the fines that we've assessed. So that's a credit to our staff who does the payments for administrative fines. There were no licenses with disciplinary sanctions for the last 2 years. Cases closed without disciplinary action is sometimes where enforcement really shines. Our goal is not just to collect fines, but to gain compliance. Our job is not to limit anyone's ability to work in a regulated program, but if consumer safety is in danger, that is where enforcement has to come in. These last 2 sections here are the alleged violations at opening. Those are the reasons the case is opened on the front end. And the last section details violations which resulted in disciplinary action. Those are cases that we actually took action on. You'll see we had more disciplinary action in fiscal year 2024 than we did in fiscal year 2023. I have 2 case highlights for you. On the first case, Miller Specialty Meats Incorporated paid a $1,500 fine for not timely repairing safety issues. And on the second case, Black Hawk Kogan Borger paid a $4,500 penalty for not completing an internal inspection or requesting an extension to complete the inspection. In accordance with all of our fines being collected this year, both orders have been paid in full. I am available to answer any questions if you have them.
Hey, board members, do you have any questions? Hearing no one speaking, thank you, Ms. Burkhalter. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
We will move forward with the compliance division, and I believe we have Mr. William Van Hook here to present the updates for the compliance division.
Good morning. This is William Van Hook, Inspection Specialist, Boiler Inspector 3 with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation under the Boiler Program. Current projects, back in January, we hired 3 Boiler Inspector trainees. One of those trainees has passed the commission exam for the Texas Boiler Inspector Commission, In-Service Commission. 2 others are scheduled to take the exam. They're nearing the end of their initial training under the NB 380 program. In addition to that, we have a boiler inspector position open for hire, posted on the TDLR website for the Midland Odessa region. That's for a boiler inspector 1 or 2 or a trainee. Regarding outreach, Chief Trout spoke at the NCOAA National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association Summit in Kansas City, Missouri. He was asked to co-chair Codes and Standards and Regulations Committee. October 14th and 15th, we'll be attending the PHCC Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of Texas meeting to give an update on Texas boiler laws and rules.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Van Hook? I believe that's it. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move over to executive office. Thank you, Mr. Van Hook. Appreciate it.
I have a hand raised.
I believe. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, Rob.
I didn't see you. Go
Rob.
ahead.
Yeah. Alan Kripe. I have a question. So what, if there's a trade association that's interested in having you guys come speak on compliance, who do we reach out to try to make that happen?
You can reach directly out to me. I usually make all the schedules as far as when we're doing training, and most of the time I'll actually provide the training, or if my schedule conflicts, I will ask the boiler program supervisor, Keith Sanford, or one of the team leads, Mr. Van Hook or Miss Deanna Dennard, to do that training for me. But if you have something that you would like us to speak on, to maybe go over boiler installation report, how to fill them out, temporary operating permits, or even the rules in general, I'll be more than happy to work with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
who else had a question? Anybody? Okay. Well, that brings us to the executive office update. We have Deputy Executive Director, Mr. Steve Bruno, here to give that update. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer, and good morning to you and board members and TDLR staff and those watching online. I'm Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director over Licensing Services. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. I have a short but quite significant and important update to provide. TDLR has a permanent executive director in Courtney Arbor. Courtney Arbor is a longtime dedicated public servant who has over 2 decades of experience with our state, primarily in the area of workforce. She comes to us from the Texas Workforce Commission, where she was instrumental in helping connect job seekers with jobs. And we are thrilled to have her here at TDLR with leadership changes over the past several months. And we're excited to have Courtney on board. So we have welcomed her. She has jumped right in and is tackling issues left and right. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Deputy Executive Director from the board members? If you have questions, please just unmute your mic and state your name and go ahead and ask your question. Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Bruno. I appreciate that update. This brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is why we're here. This is for the discussion on the possible recommendations for the proposed amendments. At this time, or amendments to the boiler rules. At this time, I would like to call on Assistant General Counsel Laura Pfefferly. We will need to, so I'm going to go ahead and let Laura pick up here and start going over everything. And when she is done, I will be asking for a motion from the board. So Laura, would you please take it?
Sure. My name is Laura Pfefferly, and I'm with the Office of General Counsel. I'm an Assistant General Counsel, and I'm the attorney for the boiler program. Before we get into the rules, I'll just give a few remarks to kind of orient us all. The entire board has seen all of the changes that we're proposing at the first board meeting, and that was in earlier this year. The rules were not published until May of this year, and so these have been in the works for quite a while. But you've seen them at your first meeting. So as we go through the changes, they're going to look familiar. There were a few changes at that first meeting, and I'll show you those as well, that those are in there. Those were included in the proposal. So when they were published, those changes were in. We'll kind of go through the substantive changes briefly. We'll just kind of walk through. If you have any, questions or comments about, a rule as we go through, we can take it up then. But mostly, I think I'd like to just kind of walk through the whole thing, and then we can go back to any particular parts of the rule that you want to discuss further. If there's issues or questions about the rules that we haven't received any comment on, that's fine. You can still, discuss that in this meeting. Feel free to bring up anything regarding the rules and the proposed text that you want to ask about, because now is the time. As you know, even if you receive a communication about the rules, they can't be discussed among the board except in a public meeting like this. And so this is, a rare opportunity basically to have a substantive discussion of the rules, because we are in a public meeting. Otherwise, the the board cannot do that. The only other option is if we had a work group, and that's involves less than a quorum, and a discussion could be done there, but we have not had a work group on these rules so far. Rob cautioned that we don't have discussions about the public comments that were given or submitted in this at this meeting. We will be discussing the rules, and the comments are on the rules, but we need to keep the focus narrow on what the proposed text is and what text we want to adopt, recommend to adopt today.
Well, Laura,
and,
can I ask a clarification question?
Sure.
Excuse me. This is Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director. If the advisory board wanted to propose any tweaks or edits to language, could they do that at this time?
Right. This is the next to last opportunity to do that. The next opportunity to comment or discuss these rules is going to be at the commission meeting, where the commission is either going to adopt or not adopt them. So this really is the time to hash out any questions or concerns about the rule text itself, because we can still make changes at this point. We can't make drastic changes because the public won't have had a chance to comment on those. That we have the public notice and comment period so that the public is able to give input. And so if we make changes and then adopt, there's been no opportunity for that input, and by law we have to collect that input. So yes, we can tweak, we can make corrections, we can go to a certain extent. And so after we have our discussion of any rule changes that anyone's recommending, then we can decide whether it's any changes that we might contemplate would require further reproposing, another comment period, putting changes off. There are a lot of options, but depending on what we want to do, it'll what the options are will change according to that. So I think
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I think we'll walk through them, and then we'll have any discussion about any particular changes, and then we can decide, how to proceed, if we want to make changes or not, if we want to make what type of changes, and then ultimately the goal of this meeting is to have the rules where we're ready to recommend adoption or recommend that we do something else and not send them to adoption. If we don't recommend, if the board does not recommend adoption, then that's where other options will be at play. But if the board recommends adoption with some minor changes that don't disturb the notice and comment process, then the commission at which we expect them to be adopted would be on October 23rd. So that is our goal commission meeting for sending these forward to the commission for consideration for adoption. We mainly the changes in adoption can affect different parties or different subjects. I don't think we're really going to stray into that sort of major change, but we'll see as we go through the discussion. So as we go through, I just want to say there are a lot of changes. You can see on your agenda, there's a long list of changes. And as I said, you saw all of these at the first board meeting, and there hasn't been change to anything except for the changes you recommended at the first board meeting, other than grammatical corrections or punctuation, that sort of thing. So they're marked. I've highlighted the rules that we will look at more closely, because there are just far too many grammatical and syntax changes to go through all of those, and no one wants to do that, I don't think. We'll be here all day if we do. So those are not highlighted, but if you have any issues or you've spotted an error or something, we can certainly take care of that. So I've highlighted in green the changes that are substantive that you may or may not want to discuss, but they're green because it stands them out from all of the grammatical and minor changes. And then in yellow is anything that's relevant to the public comments we received as of, say, yesterday on rule text. But we've also received more comment on those same sections. So those are highlighted in yellow. And then in blue, we have a few changes that were made at the first board meeting that you'll probably remember in the blowdown section only. So that the changes are limited to the blowdown rules. So we'll go ahead and start walking through, and I'll explain as we go. I'm going to share my screen, and I won't be able to see you raise your hand. But my intent is to try not to keep you here all day. So if we walk through the rules first and then go back to any discussion of particular rules, I think we'll get through it a little quicker. So let me get the rules up here.
Laura, this is Bill Quisenberry.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question because I had a circumstance that I'd previously not experienced before.
Okay.
If a board member is contacted by a member of the public regarding some action that's before the board, and it's requested that you forward an email reflecting an opinion on an upcoming item, is it appropriate or inappropriate to, I did not forward this, but it was requested that I forward this to all of the members of the board. And my concern was that that might be construed as an agreement or an endorsement on my part with that member of the public's request. So is there, as far as the walking quorum and the appropriateness of forwarding a public input thing when you're contacted as a member of the board, is that, what's the best route there?
Okay. Yeah, we understand that as board members, you're contacted by people in the industry and your own customers, and they have opinions about the boiler rules. And yeah, you're going to be contacted. The main concern for TDLR and our relationship with the board is that what we do has to be transparent. And so if someone sends you materials and asks you to forward those to the whole board, that is not something that you should do first. If you're on a work group, it's okay to share with the few members on the work group because there's not a quorum involved and you're working on a particular subject. That's okay. When you involve a quorum or more of the board, then it's becoming what we call a walking quorum if you have discussions about those kinds of documents or communications. If a member forwards something to everyone on the board and then no one responds and there's no discussion, you haven't actually had a deliberation about a public business. And so you're probably okay at that point, but it's best not to forward those things because all that does is kind of trigger people to want to talk about it. And that's what you can't do. You can't have communications and discussions going between a quorum or more of the board that are not conducted in a public meeting. Now, it's very possible that communications or documents you receive are ones that TDLR receives in the public comment process, but that's the formal route that those things should be submitted through, not informally through individual contacts with board members and the forwarding and that. If someone asked you if they can send you that kind of material, you should say, well, we can't share it and we can't discuss it outside of a board meeting. So please just submit it through the regular comment channels, and then we'll have it as an actual comment that we can take up and discuss through the normal channels. So, if you do receive communications or documents, you can't stop someone from emailing you something if you don't know it's coming. But once you have it, yeah, you're obligated not to redistribute that and have discussions about that among the board members. So that I hope that answers your question. Because
it does. Yeah, it was just a first time occurrence that I'd been asked to
Right.
forward anything to other board members. So I erred on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Clarification.
And it's okay to talk to one or two other members, but you can't involve a quorum. So, if something in the rules is your specialty and you really want to talk about, well, should we, do this rule? That's fine. As long as a quorum is not involved, then it's, no official action is taken. You bring that to the board meeting and then everyone can discuss it and then you can, act on it there. So, you really don't want to go beyond a few members, one or two members, or else you risk this issue of the quorum. And those few members that do talk about something need to not bring in other members individually or as a group, because that's the walking quorum where you add a person at a time until you get up to a quorum and nobody realizes it happened because everybody's communicating and not on the same page about that. So yeah, if you have a discussion with one or two other board members about something, y'all need to just remind yourselves and each other, we can't take this farther. We can't involve a quorum because it's public business. We have to discuss in a board meeting.
Thank
So
you.
if that's, if you need any further clarification or if you're contacted again, by all means, before you do anything, just let us know and we can kind of guide you on, what the circumstances are and, what you can share and with how many and that sort of thing, if you feel like you need to share it. You may have been contacted about things that we're already going to be talking about today anyway, but, we're in a forum where we can do that. This is the board's really only opportunity in a board meeting to discuss public business and conduct public business. Okay, so here are the proposed rules. They're marked up because when they're published in the Texas Register, we have to show what is new and what is being removed. So you're going to see a lot of strike through, which is text that we're removing. But actually, a lot of that is not actually going away. It's just being moved around. But the way we have to move it around is we have to delete it where it was and add it where it's going. And that's for the Texas Register purposes, which is where the proposed and adopted rules are published. So we don't really have any control over how we have to mark it up. But don't get concerned when you see a lot of things stricken through, because it's not like they're gone. For the most part, they're still here. They're just in a new place. And when they're in the new place, you'll see them underlined. You may see a lot of underlined text that we don't go over. And a lot of the reason for that is usually that it's just text that's been moved and it's underlined and it looks like it's new, but it's really just text that came from somewhere else. So, unless you have some concern about it, don't worry about those things, but ask by all means if you're concerned. So you're going to see lots and lots of markup, but like I said, the highlight is really going to just kind of draw your attention to the things that you are likely to more want to look at. So in the definitions, we have essentially no substantive changes except that we added blowdown definitions. So I've got those in green because those are new and they have to do with the blowdown. And again, you've seen these before in the first meeting. If you want to talk about blowdown, we can, do it in the blowdown section, but we can jump back to these definitions if we need to. Lots of other non-substantive corrections, text. The yellow highlight is items that in the rules that are related to comments we've gotten. And since we've gotten comments about disconnection, I've highlighted that definition, but this definition has not changed. It's just, the cleanup, the wording. and capitalization. It's nothing substantive of a change in that. And so, and again, installation and install are relevant to the discussion, but there's really not a substantive change. Install is reworded a little, but it's really saying the same thing, just phrased a little more clearly. A lot of these changes were to make the rules just kind of internally consistent and more clear. And so that's why you see all this markup, but it's that's all it is. It's just removing capitalization, that sort of thing. The reinstalled boiler definition is changed because we took out, without change of ownership, because you don't have to have a change of ownership for any reinstalled boiler. So that part really didn't need to be there. But again, that's the only change, but it's relevant to the discussion about installation reports. So this section here does have some substantive change. And all it's saying is once you get a certificate of operation, you're obligated to comply with the chapter, which has always been the case, and that we're going to presume that you're continuing to operate the boiler unless we have evidence otherwise. And this section we had received the public comment on, and of course we received a few today, and so that's in yellow. And we can talk about the actual comments and what changes might be considered, but the only substantive change on this, it's reworded to make it clearer. That was the intention of the rewording, was to clarify and also to remove the 30 days and just have have the installation report submitted when installation's done. And there is no deadline on installation, so that can take however long that needs to take, but we wanted to move to getting the installation report submitted earlier so that we're aware of these boilers, because until we get an installation report, TDLR has no idea that the boiler has even been set up to be operated. And so that's really the only substantive change there, is just making the installation report submitted earlier. And then it always has said that you can't test, fire, or operate unless you get a temporary operating permit or you get your inspection done. So that hasn't, there hasn't been any change there. And so let's see, the next, this really it's reworded, but it's not a change in the requirements. So I've just got it green because it's always said this, that we aren't going to approve a temporary operating permit unless we get an installation report. Since unless we get an installation report, we don't even know that you have that boiler set up. Okay. This is just a minor change. If you want to get a certificate of operation, you need to get up to date on your, if you owe any bills to us. The requirement here for an authorized inspector, this is just a change to clarify that, you need to have been working for an AIA, and we took out this list of different things you had to be doing, because you'll be doing them as working for an AIA. And again, you've seen all of this before, and there wasn't any change at the first board meeting. Commission cards, that's an update. It's a lot easier to deal with commission card issues. We made this more clear that the AIA needs to let us know when an inspector has left working for that agency. We really like to stay on top of who our, who the authorized inspectors are working for, and so that's just a clarification on that. The changes on who can install, that is mainly for conflict of interest. And it just boils down to, we don't want people out there inspecting boilers that they themselves installed. And so if you've been installing boilers for 30 years and then you become an inspector, well, we're not going to want you inspecting those boilers you installed. So that's all that's about. And, we've discussed that one before. This, has been a requirement from the beginning of the boiler law that you have to get an inspection before the certificate expires in order to continue operating. And the main change, I guess you'd say, is the slant towards putting the responsibility on the AIA to get the inspection done. And if the owner operator won't cooperate, then it's not, the AIA's fault if they can't get in there to inspect. And of course, you've seen this before. This is just clarifying and tightening up this provision a little bit, that the boilers need to be ready for inspection when we let you know to have them ready for inspection. So it's kind of common sense, but they need to be prepared, because it wastes our inspectors' time to have to wait for all this preparation to be done or reschedule and that sort of thing. And again, you've seen that. The boiler number and the tag, that's just minor. They get a number, they get a tag, it needs to be on there. This part is kind of long, but you've seen this before. This is just kind of laying out more detail about what to do if there's an accident. It could be helpful to staff and employees that just aren't familiar with what needs to be done when there's an accident. So it lays out, what to do, what to save, what things we're going to need to look at, and to, keep all of that intact so that the inspection can be done without everything being moved around or removed or whatever. And of course, the records need to be kept for the same purpose. Another provision that has to do with installation. So I have that in yellow just because it's relevant to the installation discussion. And let's see, this is advisory board material. This is it's talking about new boiler installations, but it's the real change here only is that we've added installed into this list of things that you have to do and be in compliance with when you install a new boiler. It didn't have installed there, but it's constructed, installed, inspected, and stamped in conformance with the code and with the chapter and the law. So we just added installation in there, but that's always been the case, that when you install it, it needs to be according to, the law and the rules. Another provision that hits on installation, not really any big change here. It just kind of reflects the change in 6513. It points to 6513 where there is change. This really, there's not any particular change in this. We've added, listed the code in the act, but it is relevant to installation, just not any change there substantively. This provision here, we're just kind of making it more clear that once you get your certificate, you need to be in compliance with the statute and the rules, and we're going to assume that you're still operating unless you've got records that say that you're not. And let's see, the updates to the CO detector. Basically, you need to have a display on it, and if you've installed a CO detector, it's probably got a display already, but if it doesn't, this is requiring a display. And it's also given the option to remote monitor, and when you remote monitor, you have a little more flexibility. So that's laying that out. And of course, you've seen this before, and no one had any issues with that. Just a little more flexibility to monitor remotely. And let's see. Again, when you pay a fee, you need to catch up with any old invoices that are outstanding. The fee rule here for the boiler installation report is just clarifying that the installer isn't responsible for that fee. The owner or the operator usually is going to be. And this is the new late inspection fee. We took out the late renewal fee, as it was called, and it's changed to a late inspection fee. If your inspection is late, you're going to be looking at a fee, and it's going to increase the later you are. And this is, it's obvious that this is to get the inspection done timely, which is our main goal, because an uninspected boiler is not a safe boiler, and it's also operating unlawfully because it doesn't have a current certificate of operation, which is one of the basic fundamentals of the boiler law, is that you need to have a certificate of operation to be operating, and that means you've had your inspection and that boiler should be safe. So this fee is aimed towards that, and it's also putting more responsibility on the AIA to get them done. It's their responsibility anyway, but we want to make sure that all parties are on board and understand that a delay is just going to cost you money. And you've seen this before again, and didn't have any changes for that. Let's see. We added the safety requirement that it basically says, if it's not safe, the inspector can say, I'm not inspecting because I don't feel safe, and you can't overrule him. Now, you can correct the conditions so that he can inspect, but we don't want our inspectors getting hurt. So that's really the only substantive change to this. And here's the blowdown section, and you'll see the blue. This is what was changed at the first board meeting. All the green was there, and then basically you all added a few terms here and there, and you see those in blue. And I those shouldn't be controversial because y'all agreed on those and added them. But again, we can discuss those like any other change. I think they were good changes, and that is the extent of the blowdown section and the changes. Again, those are blue. The green is the proposed change text. The blue is what was changed at the first board meeting and is now part of the rules, the proposed rules. And like I said, you'll see a lot of underlining, but a lot of that is just because things have been moved around. We kind of reorganized a little bit to make this more clear. We've added the NFPA here. Another thing that was very uncontroversial. Some of these things that we added are things that everyone's been doing for years. We just try to get them in the rules and make the rules clearer about them where we can. So I think, let's see, the only thing left, I believe, is the tubes. Getting there. Yeah. These provisions about the replacing boiler tubes and who can do that and how to do that. You've seen all this again before, and it's just basically how you do it, who can do it, and we feel like it's a real safety risk if a person is working on boiler tubes that really is not qualified to be doing that. So this is tightening it up some, but no one had any issues with that previously. I believe that may be all the changes we need to go through. Let's see. Yeah. So that's kind of an overview of all the changes that are listed there on your agenda. You know, if there's anything you want to talk about in these rules, now is the time to do that. I know we need to talk about the comment we received about the installation, so I'm going to go to that section. And then I do want to caution that you know, it's been brought up that some of you may have received materials outside of the normal comment process. They may or may not have been comments that were also submitted in the comment process, but you're free to talk about your thoughts and opinions about the rules, but we don't want to talk about particular documents or communications you may have received outside of the actual comments, because the public only has access to the actual formally submitted comments. So we need to confine the conversation to, you know, the subject matter of the rules and the comments on those rules and what changes we might or might not want to make to the rules. So, you know, now is the time for y'all to discuss. So if you all want to, you know, have a particular strategy on that, you know, I can explain our, you know, response to what the comment, you know, our initial response is, and, you know, we can modify that response according to the discussion today, because this really is going to be the first opportunity to get your input on this particular comment, because it did come in during the comment period, and this is the first time we're meeting since the comment period concluded. The comments reflected basically what we heard today is that we had done cleanup on this section, and the only real substantive change that was made was to remove the 30 days and have the installation report submitted, you know, when the installation's done. And like I said, you know, there is no time limit on an installation. You can take all the time you want to get a boiler installed, but when it's installed, we don't want to have this 30 days to wait to get the report. We want to know that that boiler is installed, and you know, the only way we know that is if you submit an installation report. We don't want it 30 days later because of the risk that a boiler that's, you know, hasn't been inspected, hasn't been operated yet, could accidentally or intentionally be fired up and operated or tested, and something could happen, and we don't even know that boiler's been installed. So we wanted to reduce the time that it could be sitting there without, you know, a notification of the installation even being done. So it was just to reduce that from 30 days to just when you're done installing. And the added language about, you know, an installation or a reinstallation, which, you know, qualitatively are exactly the same thing. If you hook up a new or a used boiler, you know, you're doing the same steps. We wanted to clarify, which, you know, the only really time, and Rob can speak to this better than me, but the only time you have to install or reinstall a boiler is if it's been relocated, disconnected, or taken apart and put back together, because you're going to be disconnecting it to do those things. And so you're going to have to reconnect it and therefore reinstall it. And so that's really the 3 times when a boiler is going to be disconnected and reconnected. And so that was just to clarify, because we were trying to do cleanup, make this you know, more clear, and we've got you know, references to some of the other requirements that apply to installation to just kind of give that up front. But those requirements haven't changed. The requirement for an installation report has been in the rules forever. And let's see, I wanted to note that you know, once you submit an installation report, it triggers the you know, the responsibility to get the first inspection done within, you know, 30 days, or to get a temporary operating permit so that you can, test fire in that. But the, if you have 30 days to wait until you file an installation report, then you can get another 30 days before you have to have your inspection done. So that's quite a bit of time for a boiler to be sitting there, connected and ready to be, completed with the installation and inspection. But we don't even know it's, installed. So the inspection, if you file an installation report and then the inspection is triggered and then you're still not ready, or you had to disconnect again or something, you don't have to have an inspection and fail it. You can just, reschedule the inspection so that it can be done when the installation is complete, if it isn't complete. So, it's not to, get you in a catch-22 where you have to have an inspection, you're going to fail. That's not the objective. It's just to get the ball rolling on letting us know that the boiler is installed. So this is kind of reorganized, but it all says the same thing it used to say. You need to get the installation report to us, and then you need to either get a temporary operating permit or get your inspection done so that you can continue on to operation. That's kind of what our response is, that this was just meant as cleanup. We aren't really changing anything that hasn't been done for the last, however long boilers have been around. But, we have these comments, so now is your chance to talk about them, and I'll give the floor back to Rob, I guess, so that you can decide how to go forward on your discussion.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay.
So I'm going to open up to anybody having any questions first so we can discuss this. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, just unmute your mic, state your name, and please go ahead and start asking your question.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Quisenberry.
Yes, sir.
In reading this, the more times you read it, the more you dissect it. I have a question regarding, Laura, if you'd scroll back up on the 65 point, item 2, 6513 A2. As far as the disassembly or reassembly of the boiler, who would make the call or the determination as to the extent of a repair? Say, trying to think of a good example. If a rear tube sheet needed to be replaced in a fire tube boiler, a Scotch Marine boiler, which would require removal of the flue tubes, what's the level and who makes the determination as far as what is a disassembly of the boiler versus just a repair?
Well, that's a pretty good question, Bill. So that is a decision that is made between the inspector and the owner. Okay, so when an inspector comes out to do the inspection, if he is conducting a certificate inspection, he has to be able to conduct the inspection. If the boiler is not where it can actually physically operate, and that inspector goes to the owner and says, yeah, the boiler can't operate. Are you repairing this right now? Is it going to be repaired today, tomorrow, a year from now? Because we get a lot of that stuff going back and forth. Well, I ain't got the money to repair it right now, but I got this other boiler that I can fire up and use, and we'll just leave that one sitting right there, and we disconnect it. We don't want to make the repair to it now, or we're not going to put it in service anytime soon, so you can disconnect it in place. Or, yeah, we're actively working this repair right now, and we want the boiler to stay active. So can you come back in 2 days, because we'll have the rear tube sheet replaced, and you can conduct your inspection at that time. So that's correlation between the inspector and the owner, and them being able to decide, and the inspector get input from the owner on what their intent is. Does that answer your question?
To clarify my question, what if the repair became necessary months before the internal inspection or the in-service inspection were scheduled to happen? If you just ran across a call from a customer and you determined that you needed to replace, a major component like the furnace or the tube sheet, or you're going to be taking a lot of the pieces apart, is the repair organization compelled to contact the jurisdiction at that point and say, I'm taking this apart, if it's not an inspector that's coming up on an inspection when the unit would be reassembled and in service? I think maybe the presence of or disassembly and reassembly as opposed to and or I'm just wondering where the threshold and who actually makes the call. If the inspector, not meaning our weld inspector, that we're contracted to have, but the jurisdictional inspection for the in-service or the internal certificate inspection doesn't coincide with that. What qualifies, I guess, would be the best way to ask, as disassembly and reassembly.
Okay. I think I understand your question now. So I'm going to go back to the scenario you gave earlier. So a company is replacing water wall tubes. Okay. So you're replacing an entire section of water wall tubes. It's going to come down to is when the certificate of operation expires. Okay. So exact same scenario. Water wall tubes are being replaced. In order to replace the water wall tubes, the manufacturer, they drain the boiler and they close the isolation valves for the water going in. They close the double block and bleed for the steam going out, but they leave the fuel connected and they leave the electricity connected. Okay. They're only working on the water side. They're going to weld this stuff back in. They're taking it out, they're welding it back in. So the first one I'm going to say is that boiler, its certificate of operation is due on, I'm going to just say, well, today is August 21st, and say their certificate of operation is due October 1st. So we'll just say a month away. Month and a week, okay? And that inspector is scheduled to come back or come out and do their inspection next week. Well, they're still going to be changing that water wall, but that inspector is going to be able to go in and do that inspection. They're only replacing a water wall. The fuel is still connected. The electricity is still connected. The steam or the outlet of the boiler is still connected. And they've just closed the double block and bleed, so steam doesn't come in from the other boiler back into the boiler, and they've isolated water going into it because they don't want water coming in while they're trying to replace the boiler tubes. So in that particular case, the inspector comes out, the boiler's inspectable, he can do his inspection, he can move forward, and nothing would happen. The boiler would not be taken out of service. Now let's change that scenario up and say the inspector comes out and that water wall is being replaced, but they're not going to replace it until 2 weeks from now. Well, the certificate of operation expires tomorrow. If that inspector cannot do the inspection and do a proper internal inspection for whatever reason, he is at that time going to say, okay, we have an option. If the certificate of operation expires tomorrow, you're doing this work. I can't do the actual inspection because of whatever reason. He is going to go to that owner and he's going to say, okay, what do you want to do? We can disconnect the boiler, disconnect the fuel, the electricity, the steam out, and the water in. If all four of those are disconnected, we can deactivate the boiler and mark it as disconnected in place. Okay. And now when they finish all the work, they can come back in and the inspector can come out and do it. And there's no penalties because they deactivated the boiler. Now, the other option is they say, well, I want to keep it active, but you can't do the inspection. So what do we do then? Well, at that point, they go into violation of the law and rules because they do not have a current certificate of operation on that boiler. And as Laura was talking earlier, we automatically expect the boiler, unless we are notified that it is not installed or it can't be operated or it's not being operated, we automatically assume it's being operated. So in that scenario, the authorized inspector is not going to do the inspection at that time because he can't do it. They don't want it to be disconnected in place, or they don't want it to be inactive. So at that point, now we're issuing a violation of the law because they have a boiler that's in an active status that has not been inspected. So now we have, do we write them a violation and say that the boiler can't be inspected and they have to go back in and they run the risk of getting an enforcement action, being in violation of the law? Or do we deactivate the boiler and make it to where they're completely legal? Or do they send us a note saying, hey, I'm not operating this boiler, it's going to be down? The important part of this is the communications. If the owner of the boiler, and it doesn't matter if they are making a minor repair, such as a single tube, or replacing an entire water wall. And when I say the entire water wall, I'm talking the entire length of that wall, where it may be, 80 panels or 40 panels of tubes where they're installing. It needs to be a discussion between the inspector and the owner to find out what's going on. And I will tell you, I've actually had this happen before where people called me and said, Chief Trout, our boiler is going to be down for 6 months and our certificate expires between now and then. What's my options? And I tell them, I said, well, you have an option of, you can have your boiler inspected and have it inspected internally, and you keep everything active, or you can remove the electric, the fuel, the water, and the outlet of the boiler and put an air gap. And now you meet the definition of a disconnected in place boiler, or a disconnected boiler per the Texas Boiler Rules definition. And now you're not in violation. It's all goes back to a communication thing. The owner needs to talk with the inspector when he's doing the inspection, and the two of them together decide what's gonna happen.
Rob, Brian has his hand up.
I got two things on this. Just a quick question as an inspector. If I go out and a customer is, for some reason, their boiler's down for some other reason other than repair the boiler, whatever the boiler uses isn't being used, and they don't want to get it inspected because whenever they bring the plant up, they want to have a full year before they have to shut it down again. Would an external non-cert stating that they're not going to be operating the boiler suffice for documentation to the state to accept that boiler is going to stay permitted but not being used until it's ready to be inspected, ready to be the system being put back in place?
Okay, so if you do an external,
doesn't really give us. It just says it's very vague in that if you decide you're going to accept that, and I think that's very, very. It's not very transparent. It's saying we might do it, we might not, and that's not how rules and law should say.
Well, okay, so you're telling me that they want the boiler to be active, but it's not going to operate.
Correct.
The inspector does the certificate internal inspection just like he normally would.
But now they're
And-
gonna be required now, but now they're not gonna, now they gotta go through and do an extension when they bring the plant back up.
No, sir, they're not eligible for an extension because if they're not going to be operating the boiler, they're not eligible for an extension. The extension process is only acceptable or is only utilized when the boiler runs 24/7. And if you go back into our rules, I think
And
it's
or in standby.
they can shut it. I'm sorry.
And or in standby. So that's
And or in standby. But in order for it to be in standby, it has to have a current certificate of operation, meaning it had to have an inspection.
right.
But if the boiler is not inspectable, then it can't get a certificate of operation.
I'm not saying
and
the boiler's not inspectable. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying customer A comes out and their whatever their system is they have that they're operating, whether it be a refinery or anything else, that the boiler itself is inspectable. They want to not have to inspect it until right before they bring the system back online. So they just want it
If they
to
don't-
they want it to be down during that period, just drained and in dry layup before they do it versus having to have 2 inspections because it costs every time they have to open that boiler up and I go into it. If they could do it, yes, they could say, okay, right now we're gonna go ahead and do the inspection so we don't lapse, and then 6 months from now we can do the inspection again right before we bring the system online. But that might be $7,000 to $10,000 for them to open that boiler up because during that dry layup time they filled it up with argon or nitrogen or some other inert gas to prevent from having corrosion. So
But we already addressed that in our rules where we talk about what a boiler is, how long it can be down without getting the extension. That is that rule review that we did on the interval, the extension of the internal interval. If the boiler's in layup, as long as they have it inspected and they keep that certificate of operation active, and they maintain corrosion, which is what the law requires to be eligible for an extension. That's the water treatment. And the law specifically states that to be eligible for the extension, you have to maintain corrosion. Well, if you're in a dry layup with argon, then you're in a layup, you've got the boiler, you're preventing corrosion. And we address that in a completely different section.
So
what
you're
this
saying-
is talking
so
about,
just to verify,
what
you're
this is
saying-
talking about is,
So what you're saying is that
go ahead, Brian.
If it's in dry layup, is I should tell my customer we're gonna file for an extension, even though you can't use your boiler because we have nothing connected to the steam header, and then then do the internal right before we bring the plant up because the plant doesn't like to miss internals. They like to have their plants, they do it for their own safety reasons.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So if they disconnect, when we come in, if they're disconnecting their boiler because they're doing a dry layup, okay, well, they're disconnecting the water and they're disconnecting the steam. Are they disconnecting the fuel and the electricity to it? If they're doing a dry layup, they only have to disconnect water in and steam or water out.
If they're doing it for preparation for an internal inspection, every single big major boiler I do that fits in, like whether it be a power plant boiler or a large water tube at a refinery, they take when they do the inspection, they take out full air. Everything is air gap, including electricity. That's just
Okay.
their rules for OSHA.
But they're preparing for an inspection, right? So that inspector comes out and he says, okay, you've got this boiler. It has no water. It has no water in, no steam or water out, no electricity, no fuel. It meets the definition of a disconnected boiler. Do you want this boiler to stay in service? I will do my inspection and I will report it as an internal inspection. You will get a certificate of operation and you can leave it in the dry up, the laid up position.
If I can't physically look inside that boiler, I cannot submit it as an internal inspection because that'd be a violation of NBIC rules.
Well, it would be a violation of the Texas boiler law rules, not the NBIC, because we don't adopt the NBIC in its entirety.
But I'm just
Okay.
saying, I can't report an internal with it actually being an internal.
Exactly. So the question now becomes,
It's an internal if it's in dry layup.
you're right, But if they've applied for an extension of the internal inspection and they're maintaining corrosion with that dry layup, then you can do a certificate external inspection.
Okay, now, okay.
Because they meet the criteria of maintaining corrosion into the area where we talk about the rules for the extension of the internal interval. So we're kind of talking about two separate things. You're talking about getting an extension. Let me finish. You're talking about getting an extension where you can't do an internal inspection, and you're requesting an extension of the internal interval. That means they're maintaining, either they've flooded the boiler completely, they've drained it completely, they put Deskin in it, they've used argon in it to keep the boiler from corroding, or something of that matter, and the boiler is completely sealed. They still have the right to request an extension of the internal interval under that scenario, and they can still maintain the boiler being active, even if they've completely disconnected it. They want to maintain it being active. So they tell the inspector, we're maintaining corrosion, we're doing this under an extension of the internal interval. Here's the approval for the extension of the internal interval from the jurisdiction. That's what we want to do. Now, let's flip to a different side. Let's go to the inspector goes out and the boiler, they're replacing the steam drum. The steam drum is 6 months out, okay? So the steam drum's been pulled out. They're replacing it. The boiler is coming due for its internal inspection prior to that steam drum being received and installed. They only have one option, and that is to disconnect that boiler in place, because you can't do an internal inspection. You can't conduct the inspection and make a recommendation that that boiler is safe for continued operation, because it doesn't have a steam drum. It doesn't have the components there. So at that point, they need to disconnect those boilers, disconnect the water, the outlet, the steam or water outlet, the fuel, and the electricity. And now when they get that drum in, that steam drum, they install it and they put everything back together. Now they got to have an inspection come back out and done to make it legal again. Because it wasn't legal. You couldn't do an inspection prior to, because it didn't have all the parts to it. Does that make sense?
Said I violated for not having those parts and still submitted as an internal inspection?
No.
Why?
No. How can you mark it as an internal inspection if you didn't do an internal inspection because there's no steam drum?
Chances are it's still there on property. I just do the one of the old ones saying there was a leak or it's too thin or
well,
whatnot.
but then you're not inspecting the boiler with the drum that it's going to be operating with.
Right. That's why I submitted as a violation, and then they cannot run the boiler until I clear the violation. The boiler, they're not getting a certificate issued at that time because it has a violation.
Then if they come into the inspector, and again, this is going back to the communications with the inspector and the owner, if the owner talks to the inspector and tells them what they want to do, you very well could do the internal inspection and make a violation of is the steam drum was not prepared or was not available to do an inspection on it. And you say you did an internal on the rest of the stuff. And if they tell you they want it to stay active, okay, well, leave it active then. And then write the violation. But you still have to come out and clear the violation and do the inspection on the steam drum when it gets installed. So that boiler now has to be opened again for them. But it's imperative that the inspector and the owner communicate together to determine what the owner is needing to do.
Exactly.
That's the imperative part here. Communications between the two parties.
A hand up. Mr. Quisenberry had a hand up, and I wanted to note the rule that's at play is only about installation reports, and so we don't have a rule open about those kinds of things you're talking about unless it's something that relates to the installation report rule. So, there's nothing we can do in rule changes at this point on that kind of issue.
Laura, the reason why this becomes such a hot bedded topic is a lot of federal programs and stuff like OSHA and all the stuff that, and EPA and all the stuff, base their findings based off our findings. So if we disconnect one in the state system, it turns a bunch of other stuff on federally, like for clean air and a bunch of other stuff. So that's why this gets real hot tested about the installation.
Right. Mr. Quisenberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In listening to this conversation, I'm really wondering if this is a good one-size-fits-all rule. Because everything Brian said is absolutely, valid points, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of a repair entity that I can accidentally trigger the need to submit an installation report in a TOP if I, disassemble and reassemble it because it says or in there, not in conjunction with disconnection, in conjunction with disassembly or reassembly or a repair. Hypothetical, and it's really not a hypothetical because it happens somewhat regularly, is if I have to change a tube sheet or a furnace out of a boiler, and it's a 10 to 15 day thing by the time I get a furnace procured and on site, and we go through all of the things with our inspector and testing to restore the unit to service. Since it says or disassembly and reassembly, am I triggering this on a boiler that's not due for an inspection, that I need to submit a TOP and by making a repair? I think that the wording is somewhat ambiguous as far as since it says or disassembly and reassembly instead of like in conjunction with disconnection, because not all the time, we rarely disconnect everything, the electrical, we will isolate feed water or blow down steam, the things there, but we will lock out the electrical, but we don't disconnect it. But since it says or disassembly, that to me opens up another issue that what is the threshold as far as a repair? Is it changing out a tube set? Is that a disassembly, or is a major component like a tube sheet or a furnace in a Scotch Marine boiler or a water wall? What qualifies or quantifies a disassembly in the triggering event to fill out a boiler installation report in a TOP? I guess is my question.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
Laura Pefferly. I think you're what you just said at the end is what the goal of this rule is. It's really just to determine when you have to send an installation report. We're not trying to redefine why or when you disassemble and reassemble. I added a few words on there because the trigger is what we're looking for, is just if it's been totally disconnected, then to reconnect, you need to file the installation report. So I don't know if what I added would help to make it more clear, but we are really just looking for the trigger as to when the installation report has to be filed. Rob, you wanted to say something?
Yes. So let me kind of go down this road. So we kind of keep going back and forth between if they have a certificate of operation, an active certificate of operation, or if the boiler's registered. Okay. And then we go in to do this repair. If the boiler is registered with the state and has a current certificate of operation, and they call someone out to do a repair, and they decide that they're going to disconnect the electric, the fuel, the water in, and the outlet, whether it be water or steam. That boiler meets the definition of a disconnected boiler, but the boiler has a current certificate of operation and by all intents purposes meets the definition of the law to be a registered and regulated item, and it is up to date. Now you go in and you make a repair on it, and your repair is done prior to that boiler having to be inspected. the boiler's still active. It's registered. It doesn't need to be reinstalled because it's already installed and you did a repair. And because of the type of repair that you're doing, you're disconnecting these other things. Okay. Now let's take it and say, okay, the exact same scenario, but now the certificate of operation expires and while you're doing the repair, and now the inspector comes out. Now that inspector is doing his inspection and he says, okay, Mr. Quisenberry, what are you replacing? And you say, I'm replacing the rear tube sheet. Okay, I'll be back after you replace the rear tube sheets. Or he conducts his internal inspection and he finalizes his internal inspection with the R1 form that you create where you replace the tube sheet. So that boiler still gets a inspection and it still goes on down the road. Now let's go one step farther. You can't get any of your parts in for 6 months. And the owner, the inspector, can't get a current certificate of operation because the boiler can't be inspected. So he's either going to be penalized for having an active boiler without an inspection, or he can disconnect that boiler and now he's completely in compliance with the law and rules because the boiler's not installed and he doesn't need to maintain it. Again, this goes back to communication between the inspector and what the owner wants to do. If a boiler is deactivated, in other words, it's disconnected in place, it's disposition unknown, it's junked, or it's just not there, the inspector, when he comes out to do that certificate inspection, he's going to talk to the owner and say, I came to inspect this object. What do you want to do? Because that boiler is completely disassembled, or it's missing its steam drum, or it's missing its rear tube sheet. What is your intent of this boiler? Do you want it to have a current certificate of operation? And now that owner says yes or no. I don't want to have a current certificate of operation because I can't operate it until next year because it's going to take me 6 months to get the new steam drum, and then it's going to take them 3 months to install it. Industrial boiler. Scotch Marine boiler. I'm putting a new tube sheet in it, but it can't be done for 6 months. Well, they can see the rest of the internal of the boiler and they can verify, so they can do the inspection. But if the owner says, you know what, I don't want to pay the invoice right now, I don't want it to be active, make it inactive. And now the owner has the option of saying, okay, I'll make it disconnected in place and I will remove water, fuel, electricity, and steam. So again, this goes back to communication between the inspector and the owner of the boiler on what their intent is. When we need a boiler installation report is at the time that a inspector comes out to do an inspection and there is not a boiler that is completely connected and has a current certificate of operation. Now, if we go out there and that boiler is, it has water, electricity, steam and fuel disconnected, and the guy goes, well, wait, you got everything disconnected. Why do you have everything disconnected? Oh, I'm in the process of replacing it with this boiler. Okay, well then I'm not going to inspect it and I'm going to make it inactive. Or the owner says, no, I'm going to leave it sitting right there, but it's got a violation on it. You know, you guys wrote a violation last year and they told me I got to clear my violation and I ain't got the money to fix that violation right now. So what options do I have? Well, the inspector's going to tell them the option you have is if you're not going to operate it, you can make it disconnected in place. And then when you can afford to get it repaired, which is what we get with a lot of the dry cleaners in the jurisdiction, they will come in and say, I just want to leave it right there. I'm going to install another one right beside it. And when I get the money to fix that one, I'll do it. So how do I make it inactive? Disconnected in place. Remove these 4 components. It's inactive. We will do a new installation when you decide to bring it back to an active status. Does that help?
Yeah, if I may ask you, would it satisfy the intent of the rule if we changed reassembly accompanied by disconnection and reconnection? If we change that to in conjunction with disconnection and reconnection, because there's a workaround there where you're basically not triggering this event to do, what in our world is we're not going to do power plants. So in our world of Scotch Marine boilers, that 1,000 horsepower boiler, it's a 10 or 15 day repair. That if we leave, the electrical connected or the feed water connected, we're technically not triggering that event to submit a installation report. Would that satisfy the intent of the rule?
Well, I think it would, but it's the board's decision on what they want to do. So, Laura, the question I would be asked is, adding what you just added, would that prompt us to have to send it back to the Texas Register again, or is this considered non-technical and it's just more clarification?
I feel like that would just be more clarification. You do have a couple other people with their hands up that want to ask.
I apologize. I cannot see people that have their hands up.
Sorry. Rob, real quick, can I throw in one question that I think has already been addressed, but that I've heard sort of been asked, or I think I have, as certainly the non-boiler expert, in addition to the other questions and comments you're answering?
Yes, sir, Mr. Bruno.
My question is, and first of all, I want to thank everybody. It's clear by this discussion how much words matter and how important it is that everybody understand the intent. And what I'm seeing through all this is everyone's dedication to safety. So thank you. Thank you all for that. Is this intending to introduce new sort of maintenance actions or new reports being triggered?
No, sir.
If that makes sense. Okay.
No, sir. So this rule, I actually, and I can share this with you. So when we got the public comments, I started going, I said, well, okay, well, what's this rule? How long has it been around, and what's going on with it? So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I want to be able to show you guys something. And what I am going to share, Edge tab, entire screen. Yes, that's what I want. Share. Okay. So I'm going to minimize that, and that, and that. And what I am going to bring up, where did it go? Okay. So what this is I went through the boiler law and rules, and I went back to like before I even came to TDLR. Sorry, my computer screen's hanging up here. So as you can see, this is from 1996. Okay, August 1 of 96. So this is what it said before. Boiler installation, any person, form, corporation performing a boiler installation in the state will certify compliance with the Texas Boiler Law and Rules by filing a boiler installation report and manufacturer's data report on new boilers, and when available on secondhand boilers. Now that paragraph or that parenthetical right there is talking about submittal of the manufacturer's data report, which we got rid of some time ago. But they're required to be submitted with the chief inspector within 30 days of completion, and the appropriate form will be provided by the chief inspector. Now, this is what the rules were when I came to TDLR in 2008. So now I'm going to fast forward to rules that were changed And this is in 2015. So I became chief in 2013. And one of the first things that I did is we did a complete rewrite of the rules and completely changed the format. And everybody can see that we did that just by seeing 6513. We have TAC A, TAC A1 and 2, B, C. But if I come up here, it's just one paragraph, paragraph D. So we broke them out. But if you look at this, the requirement has still been the same. You submit, the owner operator has to submit a boiler installation report within 30 days. In 2015, we still had the manufacturer's data report. I took that out, I think, in the next review. But then we went in and said you can't test fire and operate a boiler unless you have a subsection C, which is the temporary operating permit. Okay, so these are the old rules. There's really been no changes to the rules in this, or substantive changes to the rules in this. And well, since I've been with the department, as far as the requirements, anytime a boiler is installed, you have to submit a boiler installation report. Now, I would also ask Laura, if you would you please pull up the rules that's proposed and go to the definitions in 65.2 and pull up the definition of install. So we're saying I'm sorry?
I just want to let you know that there are 2 hands up.
Okay, thank you. Who has their hands up?
Just me still.
Yeah, there we go.
Just Brian now.
Okay, 1 second. Let me get this definition up and I will go to you two gentlemen. So, Laura, if you would scroll up to definitions and go to the definition of a disconnected boiler. And I also want to go to the definition of install or installation and install, which are both clearly marked. So a disconnect boiler is a boiler which all fuel, water, steam, and electricity are removed from any connection on the boiler. These connections must, it said before, shall provide an isolation gap, and the source shall is what it said. We changed it to must be safely isolated to prevent potential leaks or electrical hazards. So if we're not going to have an active boiler, if this boiler is not going to be connected and remain in an active status, then it needs to be disconnected if they're not getting rid of it. In most cases, if it's an industrial user, they'll say, oh, I want to disconnect this boiler and we're going to do disconnected in place because we're not going to use it again for 2 years and we don't want to keep it active for 2 years when we're not going to use it. Or they'll say, yeah, we're going to use it in 9 months. So yeah, go ahead and inspect it. I'll put it on layup and we'll maintain corrosion and we'll be able to just start up in 9 months. Okay. Now to go to the definition of an install. So we need an installation report when a boiler is installed. So to install a boiler is to place, position, or fit a boiler into position and then connect, change, or modify the boiler to enable the boiler to be brought back into service. Again, an install is bringing a boiler back into service, whether it's disconnected in place or it's never been in service or it's been in service at another location. And then the definition of install is the act of installing a boiler or associated equipment. So that kind of just takes you back to the definition of install. So we want an installation report when a boiler is not in an active status in our system. If they have a current certificate of operation, they are in compliance with the law. If you can't do an inspection or you can't get the inspection and the certificate of operation expires, now we've got to do something, and it's the owner that gets to make the decision working with the inspector saying what we're going to do. So, Brian, I think you said you had your hand up, and I think the other one was Mr. Quisenberry. I'll start with Mr. Mullen. Brian?
Well, my question was actually to Mr. Quisenberry. Say one of your customers has a bad concrete floor, or they got to break out some piping underneath the boiler that's in that concrete floor. How does this look to you as the guy that's installing it? I'm not there. You're having to basically fully disconnect this boiler, pull it out of the boiler shed, and then the concrete guys come in and do the concrete work, and then you put the boiler back in place. How does this look to you?
Well, again, this is, in my opinion, if they are completely pulling that boiler out and making repairs to the floor, the boiler has been uninstalled. And because of that reason, when it gets reinstalled, the inspection, it needs to be inspected again to get a certificate of operation, because when you completely uninstall that boiler and you physically take it out of place, it's no longer installed in that location. The inspection needs to be made to ensure that it still complies with double block and bleed if it's applicable, and it's got to have all the pertinent safety appurtenances applied for that type of boiler. So in that particular instance, that boiler is physically being removed from the place it is installed at, and therefore needs to be reinstalled.
Did you catch any of that? Or he's talking to somebody off screen?
Bill, did that cover it for you?
Yes, sir. That wasn't my hand that was up. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
Directed to you.
Okay. Who else has their hand up?
Mr. McNulty had his hand up.
Yeah, I do. Tim McNulty. Yeah, just to further on this, it does seem like the biggest part of the confusion was the or disassembly and reassembly without having the conjunction of being disconnected. If you look at the definition now, disconnected saying all, because there's a lot of repairs that can be done without removing, the fuel, water, all that stuff, the power. And so as long as I guess it's not completely disconnected, now I think with that new language, it seems like it would be a lot more clear. I'm just wondering if the other members have the same opinion.
So, Brian, are you acceptable with the words that's presented?
Yeah, I'm just putting it through my head a couple times. Give me a second here.
I'll come back to you. Mr. Quisenberry.
Yeah, I think that it's a clearer definition, because it's one size fits all, and it kind of doesn't. The repairs on a industrial water tube at a power plant are a force of magnitude greater than on a 500 horsepower Scotch Marine boiler, and I can just see where I understand the intent here, and I'm fine with that. I just want to limit triggering events that would be kind of unnecessary in my opinion for what we would consider normal code repairs.
Understood, and I completely agree with you. I don't want to make someone disconnect their boiler if that's what they're not wanting. Again, going back to communications between the inspector and the owner, there is one person that I would like to hear from, and that is our boiler manufacturer that's on the board, Mr. Still. Now, Kyle, I know you guys build boilers. You do turnarounds in an industrial setting. We've had a lot of comments we had 5 comments this morning. They were all from industrial users. So what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, good morning, Rob, and the rest of the board. Thanks for calling on me. Yeah, I think that from my interpretation of the comments from the public, they're concerned with the disassembly and reassembly in regards to routine maintenance. So, we got to plug a tube. Is that going to trigger this boiler installation requirement? And I think by changing the words and making it more clear, we can address those concerns.
So are you good with what's presented here? Well, first, let me ask this. When you go to do a turnaround in the industrial users, say you're replacing a plug in a tube, the example you just gave, are they disconnecting the steam outlet, the water inlet, the electricity, and the fuel of the boiler? Is there an air gap between those, or are they just locking everything out and doing lockout, tag out, and then you go in and make the repair?
Typically, it's locked out, tagged out, not disconnected.
So it's not made into an air gap.
Yeah.
So they don't
having
physically
that-
blind flange them.
Yes. But
Okay.
maybe writing some clarification around the air gap and the LOTO not triggering disconnection potentially.
Well, and so the definition of a disconnected boiler, it physically states you have to have an air gap there. So if there's not an air gap there, it doesn't meet the definition of a disconnected boiler.
And again, my interpretation of the comments that we heard from the public today, I think they're concerned about routine maintenance triggering an installation report requirement.
And I agree with that. I think that is their concern, and I do want to address their concerns, because the intent is not to make them have to disconnect a boiler just because they're making a repair. And it was my understanding that whenever an inspector goes out to do an inspection, and now my guys don't do industrial boilers. I used to do them many, many moons ago. But my staff's not trained to do the industrial boilers, and they don't go out and do them. The industrial boilers always have an insurance company, and the AIA does that. But again, that's a communication between the two of them on determining what is needed and what they can physically do or not do. Okay.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a perfect example of, hey, we've got to plug 2 tubes, get back online, and they're concerned about waiting on getting a reinstallation, inspection, and report before that they can come back online. That's my interpretation of the concern that we heard from the public today.
Would it,
Mr. McNulty has had his hand up too, Rob.
okay, thank you. So Kyle, before I go to Mr. McNulty, are you good with the words that are on the screen? Or do you think it needs to be massaged some more?
I personally think we should massage it a little more to make it crystal clear that it doesn't refer to maintenance.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, it's Tim McNulty. I think to clarify it, I mean, I guess, what Mr. Quisenberry was talking about earlier, where is that line drawn, to where it becomes, disassembly, reassembly? Obviously, I guess the line is drawn now that if your repair requires complete disconnection or disconnection by the definition of disconnection, then at that point it triggers this, right? I mean, does that clarify? I mean, is everybody on the same page for that?
I'm not quite sure I understand. Can you
Well,
restate
I'm
that?
just trying to clarify that if the repair is substantial enough that it requires disconnection as per the definition, then that's when you want basically this in the installation. It's now considered an installation or reinstallation or whatnot.
Not necessarily.
If the repair is not substantial enough to require disconnection, then is it considered a reinstallation? If you're just disassembling, let's say, you keep talking about boilers, let's go down to, we're over 200,000 BTUs. I mean, just a fan assisted appliance where you replace the air switch, which doesn't require any kind of disconnection. That's not what you're trying to cover there, right?
Right. So the one thing that I think we may be missing out here is a boiler is not required to be installed if it has a current certificate of operation. So if you have a current certificate of operation and you completely disconnect that boiler and you put it back together and everything goes on and the inspector comes out and he sees the boiler running, what repairs have you made? You're requesting an extension of the internal interval. Well, we had it down for 3 months. Did you get proof from or acceptance from the chief inspector to maintain your eligibility? Yes, I did. We kept argon in it, but we did have blind flanges all the way around it. The inspector never came out while the repair was going on and deactivated the system and made it disconnected in place, because when he came out, he could not conduct a competent inspection because the boiler was completely disassembled or whatever, for whatever reason. Okay. So the inspector comes out, does the inspection, or goes out to do an inspection, and he can't do it because the inspection it's not possible. There's no way to do it. And there's, this, again, I'll go back to the steam drum deal. The steam drum is completely gone. Okay. You can't physically do an inspection. So the inspector now asks the owner, what are you doing with this? Because your certificate expires in 2 weeks. It's not going to be put back together. You're not going to get the steam drum in and put it back in together in 2 weeks. I've got to do an inspection before your certificate of operation expires. Well, now the owner makes the decision of, I can't get it in. Let's make it disconnected in place. Or let's write the violation of the steam drum's not there to do an inspection, but do the rest of the inspection. He can document it, and the internal inspection was not completely performed. So the inspector documents that he has to come back out and do an inspection of the steam drum to finalize it. By him doing that inspection, the boiler stays in an active state in the registry of the state. If that owner says, you know what, I'm not going to start this thing up for 9 months. You can't do it right now. How do I make it inactive so I don't have to pay for my certificate of operation until I'm ready to start using it again? Well, the simple answer to that, and the inspector would tell him, well, you can disconnect the water, the steam, the fuel, and the electricity, and now that boiler's put into a disconnected, in place status, meaning it's inactive, and then before you can operate it again, you have to have it inspected and brought back to a active status again, meaning we have to reinstall the water, the fuel, the electricity, and the steam or water outlet.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Bill Quisenberry. Would it clarify this a little more if after reinstallation following relocation or disconnection and reconnection as defined, comma, or disassembly, that any of those individually, would that clarify that?
Well, let me ask this. How about if it just goes to, or
the reason I say that,
disconnection as defined in 65.2, what paragraph is the definition of a disconnected boiler, Laura?
I think 26.
So what if we specifically say a boiler meeting the definition of a disconnected boiler?
I think
because that
very,
seems.
I'm sorry, sir.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking that is very specific, saying that if it's a disconnected boiler per that definition, or it's a new install or a reinstalled boiler, then it has to have an inspection or an installation report.
Well, I think that serves the intent because, as Mr. Stell pointed out, in terms of numbers, we're talking about multiples more boilers than large utility boilers are simply locked out, tagged out with the double block and bleeds, and we don't have air gaps to do a repair. We simply lock out, prove the absence of energy, and make our repair. But if we include this as defined in that section, that if there's an air gap, that would be a triggering event. If that in fact is the level that they're taking it to for their safety and their rules. But for the majority of the package boilers, Scotch Marine boilers, that it would satisfy that, because you're not going to do all that at a dry cleaners or a milk plant. You just do the lockout, tag out, and so it wouldn't trigger that.
Well, and what Kyle was talking about, I don't think when he's doing his turnarounds that the majority of the time that I don't think they're doing a disconnected boiler either. They're not breaking an air gap to do repairs for making air gap for complete disconnection of electricity, fuel, air gap on the fuel line, air gap on the water line, air gap on the outlet of the boiler. Laura, can you move that as defined in 65.226 after the word disconnection? Because that's the definition of a disconnected boiler. So if we move it directly behind disconnection, I think it's very specific that we are talking about reconnecting a boiler that's been disconnected. Does that help anybody?
Mr. Chairman, I think this bill, Quisenberry, I think that really clears up the intent of this rule.
Do you guys want to leave in conjunction with disconnection and reconnection? Because we're just saying a boiler reinstallation following the relocation, disconnection as defined in 65.226, and reconnection or disassembly and reassembly in connection with the disconnection and reconnection. Well, I'm wondering if we could just put a period behind 26.
This is Kyle. Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. I think that makes it very concise.
Because now we're saying it's reinstalled if you relocated it or you disconnected it, as defined in 65.226.
I think a lot of the public's, this is Kyle Stell, I think a lot of the public's a lot of the issue was the disassembly and reassembly. That was causing the confusion, in my opinion.
And this is Steve Bruno. Sorry, Rob, is your latest suggestion to remove those terms and put the period?
Yeah,
could I ask you to show those strikeouts so we can see what
Yes.
Rob's suggestion looks like, please?
My recommendation is to put a period after 65.226 and strike through the rest of it. So I actually have two questions here. One I'm going to ask Laura first. Laura, if we make this change, I don't think there's anything substantive. Would this be able to go to the commission for adoption if the board decided to move forward with this as right there?
No, well, these were, this was just clarification of the trigger point. So no, I don't feel like this is something that would have to be, reproposed or submitted for comment. It's still clarifying what the trigger point is. And it hasn't changed if it's disassembled and reassembled and it involves disconnection, that was already in there, that triggers the installation report. So this is not changing it to say that disassembly and reassembly no longer requires an installation report. It does. It's just if it's disassembled and reassembled enough to meet that disconnection definition, we're clarifying that. So I feel like it's really a clarification.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and ask the board members one by one if this modification satisfies their concerns. So, Kyle, I'll go ahead and start with you. I think you already said that you think doing it this way was good, but I would like a confirmation from you, sir.
Rob, Kyle still, yes, I confirm.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McNulty.
Yes, I confirm.
Mr. Malin.
Yes, I just want to check the rules for mobile and rental boilers. I want to reread those definitions in my book. I'm slapping through the book as fast as I can.
Okay. I will come back to you, sir. Mr. Quisenberry.
I'm good with it. Thank you.
Mr. Crawford.
Yes, looking back at the definitions, this makes perfect sense. Yes, I agree with you.
Mr. Nestor.
Yes, I'm good with the changes as they are displayed on screen.
Mr. Cripe.
Yeah, I think given the fact that the majority of the concern was in some of the definitions of these terms, which we've addressed, and I think cleaned up more than adequately, I'm in favor of these changes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes, I agree with the modification you proposed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Malin, that brings me back to you.
I'm good with it. I still can't find the section in here on mobile and boilers. Wanted to make sure that doesn't put any undue challenges there.
Okay, well, I will just wait for you to find what you're looking for then, sir.
Oh man, it's probably when you practice law in too many different books in different locations.
So, can I help you find what you're looking for?
For rental mobile boilers. Just want to make sure that this.
So portable boilers.
Portable boilers, yeah.
Okay.
Rob, is Tim McNulty is 65.63. Maybe is that where you're looking at?
Yeah, the problem is it prints off on the heading prints off at the bottom of the page, not the top of the page.
Laura, can you go to 6563 on the screen? There it is on the screen for you, Brian. So it says the internal and external inspection of portable boilers must occur as followed. There's no changes 1 through 3, and boilers designated as a non-standard boiler in accordance with 6545 must be inspected annually.
Okay.
So, but those, it doesn't affect I understand what you're saying. I think your concern is because a portable boiler gets disconnected and reconnected on a regular basis whenever it gets moved. But we've already set precedents on that. When we made the change to portable boilers, we physically said that portable boilers do not require re-inspection at the time of when it gets installed at the location that it is being sent to or being rented to. And the reason for that is because these owners, they know their boiler is a mobile boiler. They have to hook it up every single time. And because we specifically say that we do not require an inspection in every time the boiler is moved to a new location anymore, that actually used to be in the rules, and we removed it. And the reason we removed it was because the boiler law requires the law and rules requires the boiler to be inspected within 30 days of installation, and some portable boilers may only be there to 2 days. So a portable boiler would be installed and gone before we could even get out there to do it.
Okay.
So we specifically addressed that.
My only question there is you say if something, for instance, you are gone, you're no longer the chief, so everything is gone. Where in these rules are those protections still there for the customers that have the portable boilers?
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me pull up what I'm looking for, and maybe I can. Laura, can you go to the current rules on the TDLR webpage and
Sure.
go to 6563?
Yeah,
And
that's
let's be able to see exactly what it reads on the webpage.
All it
'Cause that's,
states is the internal and external inspections of portable boilers shall occur as follows. Basically, an internal and external on section 1 annually, and then for section 4, it says the same thing except for it says biannually, and then on HLW triannually. That's all it states. It doesn't state anything that of movement or anything like that.
yeah. So the rule used to say that it had to be inspected every time it was moved. And we removed that. So now it just has to have a current certificate of operation, and it doesn't have to be inspected.
But where does it say that in these current?
It doesn't. It doesn't say that,
so
because it's not required.
So that's at the interpretation of the chief then.
Well, at the next rule review, this is not something that we're dealing with right now. That's not applicable to the boiler installation. If we want to put that in the rules, maybe that's something we talk about and put in the next rule review.
I like to operate as, I like the rules to reflect the way we operate. How's that?
We can definitely do that. We just can't do it right now. There's a very certain process that we have to follow, and that was not addressed in the well, the only way that could do is if we send the boiler rules, we make a change and send it back to public comment to make that.
Or could we do a what's that thing y'all do when y'all run across something that's not in the rules but needs to be put out there?
Techgram?
Techgram, yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem putting that in a Techgram, but I think it would be better be put in the rules in the next rule review if that's something you're concerned about.
Okay. Could we take a break and then come back? My bladder's full.
Okay. It is, yeah, we've been going for 2.5 hours. So let's take a recess until let's go to 12:45. We'll take a break. That gives us roughly about 23 minutes, and we can come back at 12:45. Nice even number, and we will go from there. So we are at recess, gentlemen. So it is 12:45. I am going to call this meeting back to order. Alex, would you please do another roll call? Let's verify that we still have our quorum.
Yes, sir. And if I could remind everyone to please make sure to have your video on, please. Okay. Palmer Dent. George Crawford.
Present.
Alan Kripe. Welcome back. Kyle Stahl.
Present.
Bill Quisenberry.
Present.
Brian Mullen.
Here.
Timothy McNulty.
Present.
Stuart Shannon Nestor.
Present.
Mark Thompson.
Present.
And Richard West. And Alan Kripe. Let's see. Mr. Trout, we still have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. Is Alan Kripe still logged in? Did
He
we-
is.
Yeah,
He's still
there he
logged
is.
in here. The video and mic is off right now.
Okay. Okay, let's we still have a quorum. I kind of want to go through and then let's recognize him when he comes back on. So
yes, sir.
I'm sitting here thinking, Brian, to address your concern, do we want to, under 6513, specifically call out a portable boiler? Any portable boiler does not need to submit a boiler installation report as long as it has a current certificate of operation when it's moved from one location to the other or to another.
I don't
So
know. I don't know if this is the place to put that or if we need to put it somewhere else in the. That's a legal description.
Okay. So Laura, if we add that in here, or is that going to cause us to have to go back to the public register, or is this something we should address at another rule review?
Well, it's apparently an exemption that everyone's already aware of. It just wasn't in the rule. So my suggestion would be to not try to add it in the rule at this time, because that would be something that would need to go to notice and comment. But what we can do is I can address that in the preamble and state that the need for an installation report is still, not triggered by reinstalling a portable boiler, but we're going to put that into the rules the next time we open the rules. And if you feel like that'll satisfy the situation, otherwise it's possible that you could do a techgram stating that, the installation report is waived, for portable boilers under whatever conditions those are going to be, and then add that to the rules the next time.
I think that's a good way to go. So I will start looking at getting with boiler program staff and drafting a techgram to put out, and then in our next rule review, it's something we can address. So Brian, I would ask that you bring that up, since that's something that you brought up. I would ask that you bring that up as one of the discussion items at our next meeting, and we can start going down that road with that.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings, I think, our questions on 6513 to a close because everybody said that they agreed and are comfortable with the words as they are presented now. So is there any other questions regarding the rules? There was no other comments. Was there any other comments from the board regarding other parts of this rule review or this proposal?
Brian Malin, I'm looking at, just scroll up a little bit to 6512B2. I think that is very vague and very open to anything. First of all, I don't like persons records because it's boiler records, because the records aren't about a person, they're about the boiler itself that's in question. But like I said, just take a couple seconds to re-look over this and see if there's a way we can clean this up so it's not literally just a he said, she said kind of a thing.
Well, the word person can be replaced with owner operator because that's what we're talking about, right?
Right.
So, and the other thing is we're only trying to establish, thank you, Alex. Mr. Kripe, welcome back. So Brian, just to kind of recap, Mr. Lynn has got us looking at paragraph 2 that's in green there. We're looking at changing the word person to owner or operator. But Brian, the one thing we're trying to establish here is that if a boiler has a active certificate of operation, it is presumed that that boiler is operating. And when that certificate of operation is expired, it is also presumed that that boiler continues to operate. And now, unless the owner operator reaches out to the department and says, hey, we're not operating this boiler, and we are given the option to tell them, well, you either need to have it inspected to maintain eligibility to continue to operate, or the boiler needs to be taken out of service, meaning it doesn't have it's placed it in a disconnected place. It's placed in an inactive status. In other words, they have no intention of operating that boiler.
Okay.
And that's what we're establishing here.
Okay, if the code's going to basically read that you either have your boiler inspected or you have it disconnected, then this is actually even more ambiguous, because now we're giving idea that there might be an exception to that rule.
Well, so first I'm going to say, Brian, is keep in mind, we can't write a rule for every single thing that happens. We have this, we go through the same thing with the National Board Inspection Code. If we wrote a rule for absolutely every single thing, our book would be so thick and it would cause problems with it. So this one was left broad for that reason. And that is, we're just notifying people, we presume that you are operating your boiler if your certificate of operation expires and you don't notify us that it's not, meaning you're now going to get a late fee.
So if I had a customer and for some reason, like we couldn't get out there, say it's a dry cleaner, but it's going to be 3 days before we can get out there, and they go, we're not going to operate these next 3 days. Where is it in this rules and stuff of how they're supposed to notify you to let you know that they're not going to operate those 3 days if they don't have the certificate? And how would you want them to do it in order to not get fined?
Well, then they would have to notify the department, an email, just like anything else that any of our constituents come to us with. It's just a notification. Hey, we know our certificate's overdue, and we shut our boiler down because we're not operating, and that's why we let it go overdue. But it is the owner's responsibility is, if that certificate of operation expires, they either need to ensure it is eligible for another certificate of operation, i.e., have the inspection completed, pay the invoice, and request the certificate of operation, or if they're not going to operate it and it's installed, they need to send us notification, a simple email saying, hey, my boiler expires on this date. I am not going to operate it. And at that point, we can move down to where we prevent a late fee from being accrued.
Okay.
Because it's presumed that the boiler is operating unless they tell us otherwise. And this was never documented before. And this is something that Laura came in and put in here just to cover the base of people saying, oh, well, my certificate expired and I wasn't operating it and we never knew. So now if they don't want to get that late penalty, they need to notify the department I'm not operating it, or they need to get the inspection conducted prior to the expiration of the current certificate of operation. So we left it broad like this to begin with. But I do agree with not saying a person. Laura, can we replace owner operator with the word person in the first sentence as well?
Well, would this be the inspector or anyone else at any time?
Well, so continued operation of the boiler is presumed unless the person establishes. What person are we talking about? There, we are talking about the owner operator establishes to the satisfaction of the department that the boiler is not going to be operated. And that's how we stop from giving them a late fee, is we have to be notified. Otherwise, we automatically assume the boiler's still installed and it's still operating. So is that good, Brian? Do you feel better, more comfortable about that now with that explanation? And
yeah, I still feel it's open, but I understand how some things have to be open. I just wanted to make sure everybody else on the board heard it.
Yeah.
Sometimes my brain always doesn't function on something until somebody brings something up, and somebody might have saw something different.
I completely agree, sir.
The next section that I wanted to look at is going to be 65.60 C. That's the new one for the fining of authorized inspection agencies. We had talked about this last time during the meeting. We talked about some sort of a way to that when we switch over from one authorized inspection agency to the next, where there's going to be some sort of a grace period between when we pick it up, because we can't immediately, because sometimes we don't know, because the insurance guy sells the insurance and we get notified 5 days later, and then we put that in the system, we make a call to the customer, we schedule it out, it's going to be a week after that. So now we're 2 weeks past after receiving insurance. At what point in time do we, as the new pickup customer, going to start being charged these fines? Because this law doesn't expand on that. It just says the person that has it is responsible for the fines.
Well, if it's turned over to you, we're not going to send a fine to Bureau Veritas if the boiler went overdue in Arise. And I believe we talked about doing, I think it was 2 weeks. And that paragraph is, we don't have anything in here that I don't think the authorized inspection agency conducts. Let me make sure before I make this statement. Ooh, that just went really small, Laura.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it all in there.
Yeah.
I think maybe 3 is what Mr. Mallon's getting at, that you're only responsible if you're technically responsible for that boiler at the time.
At the time it goes overdue.
Right.
But we also have a problem currently with JOL where my company is got it, and then other company bids it. But while they're in the bidding process, they take over the insurance for some reason. I don't know why they do it. And then inspectors don't see it and then when they don't win the bid, they turn it back over to y'all guys. And then somebody back at our office goes, "Oh crap, we were supposed to be doing that inspection." We turn it back on at our place, and now it's 3 months past due or 2 months past due or whatever it was.
Well, I am not going to, and this is something that's going to be handled within the programming. We will not penalize an inspection agency for picking up a boiler that's already overdue. We will give them ample time to go do that inspection. And I truly believe that should not be listed in here within a specific time, because I think it needs to be on a judgment basis. And so the example I'll give you is how many inspectors do you have in Texas, Brian?
Counting myself, 4.
Okay. Where are they located at? Houston?
2 in Houston, 2 in Dallas. I have a guy in Colorado that does the panhandle for us.
Oh, okay. So if you have a boiler that you pick up, and it was overdue when you picked it up, and it's in Dallas, and you got a guy here in Dallas, I would expect your guy to get out there ASAP. He lives here.
Right.
But if that boiler is in El Paso, well, I think you need more time to get out there. And I'm apprehensive of putting deadlines in here. I think this should be something that's a discussion between the AIA picking it up or picking up the coverage. But the other part of it is the AIA that let it go overdue, they need to be responsible for the inspection periodicity that is the gap between you actually getting out there or being able to get out there and get back.
So is there a way we could put some of that vague language you had in 65.12 into this part 3, where it gives you a little bit of duck and cover and allows the insurance companies not to be realized that if you're not here and your thinking is no longer here, that we're not going to be punished?
So, Brian, we're running the risk of adding stuff to it, making it go back to the Texas Register and more public comment, and then we don't get our rules adopted.
Well,
So
I think that's the stalemate we're at, though.
Do what?
I think that's the stalemate we're at in this section.
If Laura, if we add a paragraph to this that basically says that an AIA taking coverage of a boiler that is already overdue from another entity, they get so many days to do it. Would that require it to go the whole package to go back to a public comment?
Well, we can, this is a new rules section and a new requirement, and I anticipate we'll have, further tweaks down the line to the rules. Right now, I would say number 3 covers the old inspection agency who failed to get it inspected, that they're going to get the late inspection fee, and that in number 5, if Mr. Mallon's agency takes on an overdue boiler and it's not their fault that it's overdue, that they didn't have access to that boiler to do an inspection until they took it over. And so now they need to get it done, but they're not responsible for that gap after they took it over because they couldn't get access because they weren't the inspection agency assigned. So I don't really foresee a problem with us enforcing against an inspection agency that takes over a boiler that was already past due, because we already have be enforcement action to write against the inspection agency that did let it go overdue in the first place. And we can, like I said, we can sharpen the rule up the next time we change them. We can't make, significant changes like that to sort of account for that particular situation in this rule, because it's a little too much to do at adoption. But we can interpret this rule that way, and which is another thing that we can address in the preamble or even a techgram if necessary. But I agree with what Mr. Mallon's making a point that they do sometimes need a little time to get the inspection done, and shouldn't have to face the late fee for that.
This is Steve Bruno, Rob, and Laura. Would it be possible to consider adding this discussion as a discussion item for the next board agenda?
Actually, I was thinking that I would like to move this forward with Laura saying that paragraph 3 puts the onus on the inspection agency that had responsibility at the time the boiler goes overdue. I think we're kind of covered, but I do think it could use some sharpening, and I can work with Mr. Malin on what his thoughts are on how we actually do that. And the other part of this is I can do a techgram and also work with Mr. Malin on this one, on writing that techgram to ensure that all the AIAs understand that it is their responsibility if it goes overdue under their watch. But the flip side of it is another AIA taking responsibility afterwards. They should not be able to say, okay, I'm not gonna fight to get out there as soon as I possibly can. I don't think they should let it set for a month before they get out there to do it, and the other AIA be on the hook for that penalty. So I think we can sharpen it up, but I think we start with a techgram, and then we incorporate the techgram into the rules at that point when we go into it, and we add that to our next discussion with the boiler rules. Would that suffice for you, Mr. Malin?
Yeah, that would suffice for me. Shannon, will that work for you as well?
Yes, I would also like to be part of the discussion group for the techgram.
Sounds like a plan for me. I don't have a problem with that. Laura, I'm not going to get into any quorum problems in writing a techgram that's on this rule with the intent of adding the way that techgram goes into the rules for later use. Will I?
Well, you could just go ahead and set up a work group and include Mr. Mallon and Mr. Nestor in that with yourself, and if anyone else wants to be in that, and then just have a teleconference as a work group and sort it out, and then it could also be discussed at the next board meeting. But that would be a quicker way to get the rule in shape and the techgram in shape, is to just do a work group.
Okay. Is there any? And I need to make sure we stay under a quorum for this work group. Mr. Malin and Mr. Nestor both want to be involved in writing this techgram, which we will use to encompass into the rules at a later. Is there anybody else on the board that wants to be part of that work group? Because I'll probably end up reaching out to an AIA or two that is not on our boiler board, just to get other input from AIAs. So probably one from Hartford, maybe Bill Atkins, because Hartford is our biggest AIA in Texas. So I don't hear any other board members doing that. So Brian and Shannon, I will be reaching out to you. We'll go ahead and mark this down as creating a task group to draft a technical gram to be issued by TDLR to address boilers that are already overdue when an AIA takes responsibility for it. and then we can add that to our next meeting as well. So we have a overdue task group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call it an overdue AIA responsibility task group.
Rob, that's the only things I had in my highlighted sections I wanted to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Malin. Does anybody else have anything else that they want to talk about in the proposed rule package? Go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name and let us know what you want if that is the case. Okay, not hearing anything. I will entertain a motion for the rules to be sent to the commission for adoption as modified during this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, this is Shannon Nestor with CNA Insurance. I would like to make a motion to move to the next step of taking a vote and recommending the rules to be moved forward to the commission.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Brian Malin. I second the motion to send the rules to the commission.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move the proposed rule package to the commission in October. Laura, what was that date? October 21st or 27th?
23rd is the
23rd, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and it's seconded to move the rule package as modified on the screen. This is the paragraph that we changed up with putting in the or as per the definition of 65-226, and then changing person to owner or operator and 6512. I will call for any further discussion. Hearing none, I will call for the vote. Alex, would you please do a voice vote?
Yes, sir. George Crawford.
Yes.
I'm sorry, one more time, sir.
Yes, I.
Alan Kripe.
Aye.
Kyle Stell.
Aye.
Bill Quisenberry.
Aye.
Brian Malin.
Aye.
Timothy McNulty.
Aye.
Stuart Shannon Nestor.
Aye.
And Mark Thompson.
Aye.
Yes, sir. The motion is passed.
Thank you, Alex. So that brings us up to the next item on the agenda, which is recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. Brian, I think you have a couple things for me.
I done forgot what they were. My brain is dying.
One is going to be incorporation of our tech grant that we're writing for AIA responsibility into the code.
Correct.
And the other one, I believe, is portable boilers.
Yep.
And maybe nailing it down to that a portable boiler is not, does not have to be, every time it's not part of the disconnected in place part. So that paragraph. So, and I will work on some rules for that.
The other thing I'd like is in the next rules revision to actually set a definition for an external inspection.
There is a definition for an external inspection. It's actually in the law.
Yeah, but I guess we have to change the law in order to do that one, don't we?
That is correct, sir. That can only be changed by legislation.
Mm.
So, Okay. Anything else to recommendations to be on the next agenda? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and move up to the next item, discussion on time, date, and location of the next board meeting. So Alex Ortiz is going to poll the board at a later time for a future meeting. I am going to tell you guys it's probably going to be a little bit because I'm going to have to get these items drafted up in the rules and work with the task group that we're creating for the AIA responsibility. I also want to bring up during the last session, or it was the session before that, our boiler law required the boiler board to meet twice a year. That has been rescinded. It's no longer in the law. So we are not required to meet yearly anymore. We're only required to meet when we have a need. So I wanted to just confirm that with everybody because some of our members have been on the board for well before that requirement took place. So with that said, I am going to move to the last item on the list, which is adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate all your hard work and your involvement to the great state of Texas.